Once again, I have been denied access to my fair Englandshire hills due to 50-mile-an-hour winds and pissing rain. However, while it's very easy to be negative and down in these situations, I thought today's video would actually be a positive one for a change. As positive as I can be at this age. Today, I'm going to be giving credit to where it's due. That's right, 10 bands who never sold out. And to continue this positive trend, next week's top 10 video is going to be my top 10 favourite albums of 2024. So make sure that you subscribe for that one and, you know, watch it when it comes out, or if you do what you want. But we both know you'll be there. Before we get into this, I think it's important to define what sellout means. What do I mean by sellout? Well, first of all, I think you have to be a band of a certain size in which to qualify. There are many of you who will probably be putting comments in about obscure, crazy bands who never sold out. I would argue that they never had the chance to sell out. I think in order to sell out, you have to be a band big enough to sell out. You know what I mean? You can't sell out if nobody was interested in what you were doing in the first place, or limited numbers. You know, you understand what I'm saying. But I think essentially selling out is when you're trying to cater to either what is going on at the time, doing it for financial reasons, going against your morals for greater acceptance. And I think these 10 bands go against that. I was thinking then. First band on my list is Cannibal Corpse, and with good reason. They're a fucking great band. They never sold out. They were the inspiration for putting this list together in the first place. A couple of months back, I did my album ranking for Black Dahlia Murder. On the build-up to their first album to not feature Trevor Sternad after his tragic passing. During that time, not only was I listening to all of their albums, obviously, but I was watching interviews and documentaries and all this sort of stuff. And there was an interview with Trevor where he got a bit heated about, I can't remember what brought it up, but he got pissed off at somebody talking about Slayer and how revered they are. Because he was saying, well, Slayer did sell out. Cannibal Corpse never did. Now, you can argue that Slayer definitely sold out with Diabolus and Musica because they definitely went in a more groove or nu metal direction. I personally enjoy a lot of that album, and in fact, in last week's video, I stood up for it. However, there is no denying that Slayer changed their sound to cater to the trend at the time. So, he had a point. Cannibal Corpse never sold out. They have stuck to their story since day one. They've arguably gotten heavier and even more grim and gross and definitely more technical, though they're not as technical as a lot of death metal bands. But they're a band that has stuck to their story. When you buy a Cannibal Corpse album, you know it's going to be quality death metal. There's a reason they're at the top of the death metal tree, because they write consistently good music and it's just always quality. They're an incredibly consistent band. You go through their back catalogue, you know, there's albums that are better than others, obviously, but they're an incredibly consistent band. Just go through some of their song titles alone. You know what I mean? I remember, I can't remember if it was this year or last year, but again, there was some sort of bullshit trying to cancel them and people taking umbrage to what they do. They're remarkably cool people. You watch any of the documentaries of the band, they seem the most cool, down-to-earth, humble, genuine people you could ever meet. And their music is just ferocious. Their last two albums, since they got Eric Rutan in as well, have been absolutely spectacular. I love the last two albums. Absolutely incredible. I love Cannibal Corpse. I think they're an amazing band. And yeah, they never sold out. They always stuck to their story. God bless them. My next pick is an artist as opposed to a band, and that's Devin Townsend. Anyone who's watched any of my videos will know how much I absolutely adore this guy. He's always stuck to his story, and he's had several times throughout his career where he could have sold out. He started out with Steve Vai, so he got thrown in at the deep end with an incredibly popular artist, and he realised what an absolute shite the music industry is. So he kind of learnt that from a very early age within the industry, and since then he's kind of always fought against it and always stuck to his story. Of course, he did Strappy Young Lad, one of my favourite bands ever, and he broke the band up arguably at the height of their career in 2006, or was it 2007, after The New Black. Now, while The New Black isn't my favourite album of theirs, the band were rising in popularity. I remember I saw them at Download 2006. It was an incredible performance. The crowd absolutely loved them. They did amazingly well, and he walked away from the band because it just wasn't where his head was at and it wasn't what he wanted to do. I believe it was more out of contractual obligation more than anything. During Strapping Young Lad, he was doing all his solo projects, which were much less popular, and he continued with those. He went off and did a space musical with Ziltoid the Omniscient, which is an absolutely incredible album. And he's had several opportunities to sell out. There was an interview he did with Jamie Jaster years ago where he was talking about a company that approached him. He actually wrote a song. A company offered him a huge amount of money to use it, and he ended up turning it down. Even the more commercial music he does is never commercial. You know what I mean? You know it's just coming from his heart and it's just what he wants to do at the time. He's never catered towards anybody. He's always done what the fuck he does. So Devin Townsend never sold out, and I don't think he ever will. Incredible artist, incredible talent, and keeps it real, yo. That was the whitest thing I've ever... Next up is a band who featured on my hated list. Though I did specify in that this is a band that I would like to enjoy, but I just can't get into them. But it's Pearl Jam. You cannot deny that they never sold out. I believe in the 90s that they found out that Ticketmaster were charging a service fee at a charity gig. And after that, they boycotted all of Ticketmaster's venues. Instead erecting their own arenas in rural areas to play shows for fans. Now, as much as I'm not a huge fan of their music, there's a lot of integrity to this. A lot of people slag off bigger bands for doing certain things, but it's the bigger bands who have to take a stand. Metallica, of course, got a ton of shit for standing up against Napster back in the day, thinking it was all about them. I truly believe that they were actually making a stand for smaller bands, because the bigger bands are the ones who have to make a stand for stealing music. And now a lot of people do actually believe that Lars was right, because it's always the smaller bands who get fucked over. So Pearl Jam, in this case, they were making a stand, I think, for music as a whole, for artists as a whole. So it's... I run out of things to say. Pearl Jam might not like the music, but artists with integrity, and they always do their thing. So it's raining. Next up is a band I got a feeling some people might take umbrage with, and that is Nirvana. After Nevermind, they were the biggest band on the planet. And it would have been very easy to have just done an album full of more commercial alternative rock tunes. However, they released In Utero. Now, of course, there's one song on there in particular which is very similar in its chord structure to Smells Like Teen Spirit. I'm not going to say the name of the song. I'm sure you all know what it is, because, you know, YouTube gets funny with this sort of stuff now. The album's pretty unrelenting for a band that size, and it's certainly not a commercial follow-up to an album like Nevermind. Now, once again, it's easy to slag off bands once they get to a certain size. But, I mean, you've got to hand it to them. They stuck to their guns. They wrote the music that they wanted to make. And, of course, it still sold millions. It was always going to. But, you know, it wasn't a commercial album by any stretch of the imagination. And I think it was always cool seeing that performance on Top of the Pops for my fellow England and Shireians, when they were told that they had to mime along to their own song, and Kurt decided to just do the most droll, monotonous vocals that he could do just to show that he wasn't interested. But either way, Nirvana, I think... as much as they are a band that seem to appear in my comments as a hated band, I don't think they sold out. I really don't. I think they stuck to what they did, and yeah, good on them. This next band is a band that I was unsure whether to put on here, because they're certainly not as big as some of the other bands, but Fugazi. I couldn't not include them because Ian MacKaye has always been about integrity and having a moral compass and sticking to it. They always had that DIY aesthetic. I believe they always made sure their ticket prices were like no more than $5 or something like that, so that people could always afford to get in. And same with their albums as well. Of course, Ian has Discord Records, which he releases a lot of stuff on there, and they're always affordable prices. Yeah, maybe, you know, this is probably the... I mean, they were a pretty big band, though. They're definitely a band's band. You know what I mean? They're one of those bands where people... So many artists just look at Fugazi as the one of those bands with integrity, and with good reasons, because they did. No, they're not anymore together, but, you know, hey, Fugazi, someone's coming. We're at the halfway point, so I'm going to throw in a band that this is not part of my top 10. This is a band that I'm actually interested in your opinion. Napalm Death. Napalm Death are one of my favourite bands of all time. I love this band. I listen to them all the time. They're just incredible. They scratch an itch that very few bands do for me. However, in the 90s, the mid-90s to late 90s, they definitely incorporated groove elements and stuff of the time. Now, I'm well aware that this is probably me more likely wanting to stand up for a band that I love. I'm sure you have bands like that as well. People talk shit about and you just, hang on, I don't think you're giving them a fair due. But my argument would be that, first of all, Napalm Death have always been a band that have experimented with different genres and styles and incorporated it into their sound. And groove was always a part of their sound. Even on their debut, Scum, there's elements of groove on that album. You go listen to some of those riffs, some of them with some really groovy stuff, especially from Enslavement to Obliteration. Can't remember the damn song now, but this is a band who've always stuck to their guns, especially politically speaking. I mean, they've made such... They've, had outright fights with Nazis standing up for their rights and standing up for their beliefs. I enjoy a lot of those groove albums. I know deep down that essentially they did cater their sound to what was going on at the time. But I'm just interested to what you guys have to say about them, because Napalm Death are one of my favourite bands ever. So, fuck you. That's not nice. This next band I've got a feeling might get some feedback as well, and that's Tool. Love them or hate them, I personally enjoy much of their musical arrangements. They're a band who've always done things their way and they've stuck to their sound. They write very complex music with often a lot of crazy time signatures going on. Danny Carey, whether you like them or not, is one of the best drummers ever. He's incredible. Of course, they had Fear Inoculum come out in 2019, which was their first album in 13 years. And there was, it's packed full of like 10-minute songs. There's no denying that this band have just stuck to what they do. You know it's Tool when you hear them. You know what I mean? As soon as you hear that bass, Justin Chancellor, I think, is a very underrated player in many ways. I think he's so integral to the Tool sound. Danny Carey gets a lot of credit. I just gave him a lot of credit. But I've also just given it to Justin Chancellor as well. His bass tone and style is just synonymous with the band, and you know it's them immediately. They're a huge band and they've done it their own way, really. They've just stuck to what they do and they don't really cater to anybody, fans included. In fact, they slag off their fans a lot, which is I'm not really cool with that. The only issue I've really got with Tool is when Maynard slags off metalheads, because I would argue that the vast proportion of his audience are metalheads. So that's the only point of contention I have with Tool. But again, it's certainly not catering to anybody, is it? And let me know your thoughts on this one. My next pick is Melvins. Is it Melvins or the Melvins? Anyway, Melvins. Buzz Osborne is one of those... he's just one of those incredibly disagreeable kind of people, you know what I mean? He just does things his way. I've seen so many interviews with him where things just seem so awkward, where he kind of makes things awkward. He doesn't back down on anything, and he certainly doesn't cater to anybody. This is a band I think you had the potential to sell out, because what's classed as the Atlantic years. So what did they have? They had Stag, Houdini, I can't remember. They had 3 albums that they put out on Atlantic. And they could have quite easily sold out and really catered towards a more alternative, friendly sound and garnered a huge audience from it. But instead, they just did crazy, weird shit that a lot of people just don't like. I love the Melvins, and I have not heard all of their albums. They've done so many albums, and they've done so many styles, so many eclectic things. Some of it can be quite fucking boring, if I'm honest with you. But the stuff I do love, I fucking love. And this is a band that they've been incredibly influential. I know that the New Orleans scene, there was a great documentary on Noisy years ago about the NOLA scene and how those early Melvins albums had a huge impact on sludge metal. And they've done some catchy ass songs, man. They really have. And I still enjoy Melvins to this day. Not all of it, like I said. But they're a band that could have sold out. I think they were one of those bands that were kind of, they had enough interest in them. They were a big enough band where they could have just gone, you know what, we're just going to do this style, and it would have probably made them that much bigger. But they didn't. They just do what the hell they want and write what the hell they want, and that's it. So yeah, Melvins, I think they're a worthy addition to this list. Next pick is Iron Maiden. Love them or hate them, once again, I enjoy many of their musical compositions. Iron Maiden have always stuck to what they do. They've never sold out. And I think that rightly puts them, you know, they're one of the greatest heavy metal bands of all time. Traditional heavy metal, of course, but they've achieved what they've achieved with very little media interference. Of course, you read about them all the time in the magazines and stuff, but you know, the metal magazines, but they've never catered to the mainstream. They're one of those bands that can go for years without you really reading an interview about them, but they're always filling out stadiums and arenas, and they're still putting on great shows. And although some of their later albums are not as good as the older stuff, they're a band who stick to what they do. They have their sound. You know it's Iron Maiden as soon as you hear it. Judas Priest, of course, released albums like Turbo, where they catered a bit more to what was going on at the time. Maiden never did. Maiden always stuck to their story. Love them or hate them, they belong on this list. They never sold out. They never fucking sold out at all, ever. Good on them. Good on them for that. No more to say. I don't know why I bloody shouted then. My next pick is Meshuggah, another band who have stuck to their story. They're a huge band. There's no denying they're a huge band. And they've been incredibly influential. In fact, they pretty much single-handedly created Gent, which, even though that has become incredibly mainstream, Meshuggah have still kind of remained their own thing, and they still write consistently challenging, aggressive, really heavy music, and yet still remained at the top. They're still revered, and rightly so. I mean, some of the rhythm stuff they do is just absolutely incredible. They're one of those bands that continually write songs that take you a little while to get into, a little while to grasp, and I think that's a great thing. I love bands who do that sort of stuff. You know, I mean, I love catchy bands as well. I don't know why I did that. But they're one of those bands that have just stuck to their story. You know, there are many bands that have altered their sound. In Flames, they write complex songs that are not easy to digest. Getting through a Meshuggah album is not always an easy thing to do. But despite all the success, they've never sold out, and they've never bowed down and tried to do anything else. So, yeah, good on them. And my last pick is actually going to be Dillinger Escape Plan, because they wrote incredibly aggressive albums throughout the entirety of their career. And they bowed out at the right time as well. I always respected them for that. They not only were they an unrelenting band on record, but their live shows were always crazy as well. You see footage of them playing. They were physical altercations pretty much all the time. And they were a band, I think, who realised that the older they were getting, there was only so long they'd be able to keep doing that. So rather than trying to just mellow down with age, they ended the band on a high note. Was it Disassociation? Was that their last album? I can't remember. Either way, I thought that was a fucking great album. It really was. They always experimented with different sounds, always had crazy song structures that were all, they could be, again, like Meshuggah, could be difficult to get through at times. And some of their albums can be a bit, they take multiple listens to fully grasp. But I think they did it incredibly well. And they were a band that I enjoyed a lot. I don't think they had a bad album. They always stuck to their story. And most importantly, they went out on top. They went out as the band that you remember. And you got to give them kudos for that, because they could have carried on going for a while. You know what I mean? It's like they just stopped what they were doing and concentrated on other stuff they wanted to do and put the band to bed. So, fucking incredible. Great band, a lot of integrity, a lot of intensity, and it was there the entire time, and they went out on top. So, yeah, Dillinger Escape Plan is my final pick for this video, so there you go. So there we go, another video done. Next week, I'm going to be doing my top 10 albums of 2024. Continuing the positivity. But don't worry, the negativity will be back. Because if you guys are interested, I might do a video of 10 bands that did sell out. Another video I've got coming out soon as well, I've ranked every single Metallica song. I've had so many people talking shit about Metallica. I had one guy calling me a poser because I like Metallica as well. So what did I do? I decided to do an entire video based on all of their songs, which will be coming out at some point, probably next week. As soon as you start telling me I am a certain thing or I shouldn't be doing certain things, more than likely I'm going to do it. So, you know, this is my channel, I'll do what the fuck I want. And judging by how many of you mofos are subscribing and watching my videos, I think a lot of you are on board. So, yeah, arrogant, maybe. Yeah, I've got nothing else going on in life, so I've got to do it somehow. But yeah, we're coming to the end of the year, so next week I'll be doing my top 10 albums of 2024. And yeah, I'm just now sat in a car in the rain and wind. End video now. I've got an edit to do